Yes. Should I start, yeah? Okay, should I start now?
Well, we'll just give it one more minute. I thought Glenn was going to join, but I don't see him and the participants here. But welcome, everybody. Welcome to the USPA, one of our master classes. We are so grateful to have Sergey Kernbach with us. And we're going to go ahead and get started. And Sergey, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Probably I start presentation. I will introduce myself step by step during this presentation.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Glenn was going to do our presentation, your introduction, but I don't see Glenn on this morning or this afternoon. So however you would like to do it.
Yeah, okay. Then I hope you can see my slides.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, and I will start. Again, many thanks for invitation. It is really a pleasure to speak here. Talk is about different sides of consciousness. At least I try to share our experience. What we, let's say, do. What we do in this field. The talk is quite long, about a little bit more than 60 minutes. And logic is, first of all, I will start with phenomenology, at least to share our understanding of this unconventional phenomena related to different sides of consciousness. And here is really important to see a strong methodology, so it should be a convincing phenomena, as well different convincing phenomena. Then it's very important not only to demonstrate some phenomenology, but to also to provide understanding, some models for understanding and for exploring different sides of this phenomena. I start a little bit from historical point of view. We have, at least in the common development, we have 3 different models. So I will shortly speak about this, and especially this last one, quantum effects. It's let's say very promising now. And this enable us to develop different instrumentation based on this, let's say, phenomenology and models. And we work, in fact, in sensing, with different sensor developments. And I will speak about 2 different effects here. Also, first of all, one effect is related to, I would say, there's a new phenomena what we explore, this sort of mind matter, so object operator object experiments, and another one is mostly for sensing. Mind matter is a classical mind matter approaches. We started with development here quite a long time ago, and last 7 years we put this device on the market, and I will share, let's say, some, so there is a lot of presentation on this. I will share some basic and latest development here. And of course some conclusion here, because all these topics are crazy enough, but we still even more crazy topics. What if, for instance, we have some networks? What if we can share our consciousness? Even for us, we started the experimentation here, but we cannot interpret the results. So this is the whole logic of the presentation, and I will start with the first point of this phenomenology. Question what we ask ourselves. And of course, in the community, are there any real unconventional effects of consciousness? Real mean it's not only about philosophy of consciousness, but about, let's say, if we apply to this phenomenology the same requirements that we apply for, so if we do peer review evaluation for journals, for scientific journals, if we apply the same criteria, so can we find any let's say, useful and real effects in this term. So it should be, of course, as a concrete examples or concrete experiments, for sure measurable with modern instrumentation. For instance, spectroscopy, optical, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, impedance spectroscopy, also like this. It should be also observed and experienced by many people in different time periods. It's not something what is new and only one person observed this, but it's well known, should be well known. And of course, if it's well known, it should be replicated in different laboratories. So this is more or less my criteria for these real unconventional effects. And well, in different talks, at least, I represent more or less 3 different aspects of unconsciousness, and I would like to share all 3 of them also here. Also, first, what I think makes sense to consider as a strong phenomenology. We know all of them is operator dependent effects. I mean, there are different names, of course, but we know this as healer, for instance, ESP, extrasensory perception, different psychic effects, and so on. They are well known, of course, in the history. There were different programs in US and Soviet program known. Currently, we have a lot of private funding also support this sort of research. In the 20th century, that was one of the largest area of publications. We know probably there are thousands of publications in this area. And so I would like to start with a concrete example. Probably, I mean, everybody who deal in this area know this sort of effects. At least we use one example is produced by Juna. It's a very famous healer in 80s. And he was famous, also started to be famous after he healed this big boss in those time, and I mean, he had always a connection to very mighty persons. And because of this connection, one large research institute, as a not laboratory, but really a large research institute, about 5 years explore different phenomena produced by this person. And we, let's say, consider one of them. We call it a delayed thermal effect. What it is? Typically, treatment look like, as here shown in this image. So he put hands locally and do a sort of mental focus on a specific body part or a specific person. And after a while, after something like 20-30 minutes after this treatment, this body part increased temperature. This, of course, well measurable with infrared cameras, with normal with normal thermometers, temperature sensors. And here is interestingly that this increasing of temperature in specific body region that take couple of hours. So it's increasing up to a specific level and keeping this level several hours. What was discovered, at least really amazing, so there are many books related to this phenomena, that this effect appear not only locally but distantly. And just think about this was 80s, and so this strong scientific institute, and if they see, okay, person was standing in different room or even more far away, and still can produce these effects, then of course there was huge mystery as to how it was. And here we encounter the first time if at least this laboratory confirm this sort of effect, of effect, but also completely didn't say anything about this distant treatment. And also important, at least in this in the first series, there was several experiments related to water, treatment with water. And in the same way, but instead of person, some samples with different fluids, and changes in the level of physical chemistry are measurable. For instance, changing of chemical reactivity, heat capacity, capillary force. I mean, many different changes was extremely visible here. And as let's say in combination of different phenomena, there was to some extent really unusual, and at least as many people try to, of course, to reproduce it. We also do this, also done this with, for instance, Qigong master was in China, so multiple attempts in China. Through this strong thermal insulation, we tested on water samples, also with impedance spectroscopy, so try to replicate this approach. The same way with, for instance, he trained absolutely unprepared person to demonstrate this phenomena, and then we also both investigated this, also this person and this person. These are replication in our laboratory. We use also this infrared camera and try to record, as first of all, to reproduce this phenomenology, just to try to increase temperature in local and distant way. And you're sitting a couple of meters away in different room. You put just mental focus on a body part, and you see strong increase of temperature here. And also in our laboratory, we measure it with colorimeters, for instance, change of thermal capacity of fluids, what that was demonstrated in the first experiment, and in fact we confirmed all of them. Another series, I'm show different approaches. There was, of course, developed through years with monistic, Buddhistic monks. They are well trained for this sort of meditation, as a local and distant meditation. And in our laboratory, for instance, they are sitting, for instance, in the front of the sensor box, or over a wall, or in different room, or in different building, and number of really many attempts where we are in different countries and do this in non-local way. And finally, just to mention that this was replicated not only in our laboratory, but well known. This thermal effect is well known in context of this Tuma meditation for in Tibet. Monks that are sitting outside and trying to dry this cloth. And there was also some experiment conducted with this monk, and it's the same effect here, for instance, well visible. So that without mental focus, they do a meditation, increase temperature, but without mental focus, if this meditation stop, temperature drop down here back to this level. In the second attempt is the same, without mental focus, temperature drop down. But if they do mental focus, concentrate consciousness in this body part, there is no drop of temperature. So here they stop meditation, but still this high temperature level of temperature still keep in the body. And this is exactly what was demonstrated in first experiments in 80s and in our laboratory. A couple of images here. For instance, this Tuma session, this replication of this +1 paper, and you see how quickly body temperature increase. And then if here this mental focus stopped, so consciousness is no longer focused on this body part, this high level of temperature still keep on this level. And we even calculated how many energy a person should put, to maintain this high temperatures, megajoule area. And then we have really to do active cooling because it was too hot for this person. In the same way, it's worked quite well if you increase temperature or decrease temperature. So just by putting mental focus, even on a different person, it works in our own body, and a different person, you can decrease it and keep in the low temperature level. Work well. Body temperature is the same. There's some details, but this even it's let's say it's not only related to skin and the skin effect, but also if you are measuring core body temperature, it's working the same way. This experiment with a Buddhistic monk, just in the same phenomenology. If they focus on tension, here we are measuring chemical reaction, so in electrochemical way, so this dissolving of CO2 in different ions, and here you can see the speed of different ionic reactions. So we're measuring this with empirical spectroscopy. And of course, I mean, we keep into account different temperatures, so this body emit a lot of heat. We took this into account. I mean, this experiment was really well prepared. And still, here, for instance, they enter in the room, and here exactly they start meditation, and exactly this point of the difference is about 1-2 minutes between start of meditation and start of changing this the speed of chemical reactions, and we see very well how they fit. I mean, begin and end of meditation. The difference about one minute about let's say this point and the point and time point. Yes. And then amazingly, I mean, this highly targeting. We have 2 channels here, and person, if person target with attention only one channel, we see these changes in exactly this channel. So I mean, it's really nice itself by itself. Similar approach, if you because we was curious, okay, how it's possible. These long-term effects. Here we done a sort of sensor, thermal sensor. Also here electrochemistry inside, temperature inside, and temperature sensor outside. And so we put them both in hands, and then ask people to focus attention only on one hand. So we measure temperature of hands. Of course, there is some inaccuracy of this measurement, but effects what was appeared, they are again to some extent amazing. For instance, here is a control. If a person stop this, let's say, mental focus, this meditation, and put containers back to the table, we see a drop of temperature, and temperature is stable because, I mean, they are on the table, there is no influence of heat to these containers. But if person so in this time focus a mental attention on this container, so on one of these containers, then we see they still keep increasing temperature still 12 minutes after end of experiment, and only after this both containers will become equal temperature. It seems that this mental focus change properties of fluids. In this case, at least, we measure this in colorimeters. It seems in this way thermal capacity of fluid was changed. Okay, this published. It's one of these publication. And we had also other publications in this way, but I mean, this can be read in more details. At least this was one of first example where we see, well, that consciousness is capable for doing something strange. It's still well reproducible, replicated in many laboratories, and we cannot really interpret and understand this result because, I mean, changing heat capacity of fluid just by mental focus. You know, it's we try to explain to our colleagues in physics, but that was difficult, of course. Okay. Second, what I would like also to share, I also consider it as a strong mental phenomena, what we call brain-to-brain interactions. But not in the way like telepathy. It's a mostly biological communication. If we think, so we consider brain as a receiver and emitter. And if we do this, I mean, we can extend this sort of brain-to-brain in more larger way. For instance, human animals, human plants, and we've done a lot in these human plant experiments. Again, all this, I mean, all that experiments are well known. Especially in plants, you know this book of Tompkins, Secret Life of Plants. So he also published a number of experiments what he conducted, multiple replications, and here, especially if we, for instance, do in human plant art, we have no ethic issues. So it's much more easy to conduct all these experiments. Okay, just to give some examples. Like I said, the telepathy is nice, but it's difficult to reproduce. But in history, we know a large number of experiments that with animals, And reason is because with animals is simpler. Animals cannot falsify results of that experiments. For instance, if you give some mental command to dog either understood it and do this, or just sitting and do nothing. So it is much more easy to interpret this sort of results. It was conducted in different laboratories. So I think firstly in 20s, 30s, then in 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, there's a number of replication of these experiments, again over large distances. And here, name of the program, because this was a state program, remote impact on biological object, and this name still, I mean, keep in the history for multiple years. And now just think about, for instance, this Havana syndrome. Still not really explain it. I will not comment this, but just notice this program was created about 100 years ago, so impact on biological objects. Well, nice experiment. What I like it, and I refer it every time if I speak on this topic. This experiment was conducted as a series of experiments, not a single experiment, of course. In 60s, so this particular one in 67, and the program was about communication with submarines. You know, submarines, it's underwater communication is tough because high damping factor of water, no electromagnetic communication is possible. And here, different countries explore different approaches. We know this program, for instance, in US, so in very similar way. And at least in this experiment, people use biological communication with twins, different twin animals, in this case, twin rabbits. So there are some difference in details, but this was done in the way electrodes was introduced, implanted in the brain, in hypothalamus. And the second animal was put on, let's say, different distances between 5 meters and 7 kilometers. And then they measured EEG of different brain regions. Because you know, EEGs is sometimes difficult to interpret. There are some different algorithms how to interpret this result. And I put, and those, let's say this program was discontinued because lack of practicability. I mean, a nice result was obtained, but they are not practicable at all, and the program was discontinued. But published was about 20 years later, only in 84. And I took some table of this experiment just to demonstrate level of experimentation those time. There are different algorithms to recognize this EEG, and here this rate of outcomes, also positive outcomes to all attempts, and there is a number of iteration quite large, so about 30. In 25, 27, more than 30, and we see the rate about 0.9 to 0.89. I mean, quite a high success rate of all of these attempts. And you know, this so exactly this approach I know was applied for space, as a communication with space station those time, in I think in 90s with Mir. But discontinued by the same reason. So Mir is much more easy to communicate in common way, but at least people tried and received more or less similar outcome. So, and now there's one example how this unconventional research in 60s, they become to more or less mainstream science now. There's a few papers, probably you know them, this from Pearson Laboratory, all this paper, what they published, what they explored, even this nice paper from Esan in Helion. He proposed a sort of communication, so it's quantum communication, these terms, either through Penrose-Hameroff model or Fisher model. I will speak about this model later on. But it seems, I mean, this sort of exploration become now more and more mainstream science. With plant, like I said, I will show later a little bit more, but we work mostly with plants. We produce phytosensing systems, and so experiment in this way a lot with plant. We're measuring hydrodynamics, signaling system, and the different subsystem in the plant organism. And typically, for instance, typical experiments, how it look like, we prepare a plant. As first, we input some stimuli. And measuring here is electrophysiology is measuring, biopotential, and in biopotential most responding is so-called action potential. And you have to put some stimuli, the first stimuli on plant. Plant become to some extent sensitive. And now, for instance, we cut a piece of a leaf here, and you see this action potential a couple of times. And now, if you for the next time you just do not do any physical movement, but you do intention for a physical activity. For instance, you have a mental image how you cut some pieces of leaf, and then plants in many cases demonstrate a reaction just a new mental focus. And this is amazingly because I saw this personally, and if you experience this for the first time, you cannot really believe that you see this. So this is sort of experiments. Again, from my point of view, this biological communication is a convincing example of unconventional phenomena related to consciousness, with many replication, many iterations. And the last one, what I would like to share is long-distance interactions. And here, long distance means in terms, again, biological communication, what I showed in previous section. But here, if we put emitter and receiver, something like 1,000 kilometers, between 1,000 and 20,000 kilometers. So this sort of experiments is well known again in the last century and in this century. A lot of replications. A lot of replications. And here something new, what we let's say discovered, but it's more in this quantum model, this object operator object type of experimentation, when we can connect, let's say, one object with another object, and here we put some stimuli and we receive response from this object through operator. I will show this. To demonstrate this sort of experimentation, how we do this, for instance, we are here in Stuttgart, and we have colleagues over the whole Europe, and especially in Australia and New Zealand, and exactly this kind of experiment is produced this large distances. And so, for instance, here. This is about 10 years ago. That is one of the first long-range experiments. In Australia, we had emitter. It's about 1 milliwatt optical emitter. So with this energy, you cannot communicate over 1 kilometer distance. In Stuttgart, we have in those times there was a specific sort of let's say impedance spectroscopy, but specific sort of impedance spectroscopy. And here in Australia, for instance, people switch on this emitter device, and in Stuttgart we see responses. And we published this. Of course, there was multiple iterations. This for sure it's statistically significant. Statistically significant. Here, the same, for instance, iterations with Moscow, this 2,000 kilometer, this Langfang in China, it's about 8,000 kilometer. I mean, we receive always the same, so it's a change. So here we're measuring change in chemical reactions. So chemical reaction change a speed, so we see there's an inclination of this course, and in all these cases we observe a correlation between whatever we do distantly and then a local change of our sensor meters in laboratory. So they work in a more or less similar way. Just to demonstrate that sometimes it work, so this object operator object experiment, they work in really strange way. We call this effect Mandelbrot effect. Also this person who for the first time conducted it. The idea is rather simple. Seeds for germination, you know, they have to be as a first in water for a couple of hours, and then if you take it back from water, then the idea of experiment was to divide this into two parts, and one part was gamma radiation, was exposed to gamma radiation, and then after this the DNA, also chromosome dysfunction, was measured. But by the way, this experiment was conducted in Institute of Genetics in Moldova, so it's a high level for experimentation and instrumentation there. And so, of course, some dysfunction was discovered here. Probably, you know, in the chromosome there are some bridges, and these bridges were destroyed. But exactly the same type of dysfunction was discovered in another part of chromosomes, I mean, in another part of seeds. And distance between seeds was about 7 kilometers. And this, it's again published. I mean, this really nice example how this sort of object operator object experiments, how they look like. This our attempt again in the same way, operate also object operator object with plants. Here is also this sort of experiments was first conducted in 86. And a little bit different context, and so we replicated this in 2022, I think. So we took Dracaena plant and took samples, tissue samples here in some image, and we put on this emitting device, and the distance between emitting device was about 3 kilometers. So this was in one laboratory here, and this in the second location. And then this generator was activated for 30 minutes, also 30 minutes active mode, 30 minutes then off time, then again 30 minutes activation, 30 minutes off time, and this whole approach was conducted over three days. And what we discover finally is that plants, and we measured biopotentials here. Biopotentials demonstrated exactly if we activate the emitter, that demonstrate a spike of biopotential in extremely periodical way. It means we able to disrupt this plant physiology, electrophysiology in very unusual way for this plant. Like I said, there was a number of, let's say, different side effects what we also discovered, as it's published anyway. Again, a nice example of this object operator object experiments. And here, just think again about this Havana syndrome. Okay. So at least I demonstrated a few examples. Of course, in the community we have much more of this phenomenology with healers, with let's say operator device or operator device operator way. Now is a time to try to understand what does it mean, what we can learn from this phenomenology. Why it's important? Because you know what experimentation gives to us. Just some numbers, if we are lucky. If we have modern instrumentation that provides number, in some cases we receive only some qualitative result, yes or no. And without model, we cannot really interpret it. So we need anyway a model, and only model give us this understanding. So this importance of this modeling. And so I will try to give some overview what model are, let's say, available for us, and which of them we can use for, let's say, for this exploring and understanding task, and of course later on for development of some technologies based on this. I will start with something simple and very old, you know, things like this. This bubble model probably disappear even in this animalistic times, where everybody believe we have some reality here, and we have some outer walls there. I will not again comment many different aspects of this model. Important is interaction, how they interact with each other. And of course, this interaction is a key point because exactly this interaction give us later on all this beautiful model what we use even now. Makes sense probably to first to make a jump between let's say this early development to Arabian development. Of course, I mean this Platon ideas, Aristotle. I mean, of course, they keep here. But first, here in this 7th century, we discover a very nice as a number of bubbles here, and each of these bubbles they have, for instance, several bubbles in physical world, in informational world. And if I read this book. He proposed, Jabir, he proposed, attention, artificial language to describe and to create artificial things. So, and if I compare this, it's very, very similar to algorithmic language. So he created algorithmic language to create some program, sort of program. And this in between, let's say, 7th and 9th century, this was a lot of these ideas in Arabic world. I mean, they describe in exactly this way. Then the next point properly in this development of this model is Renaissance time, Ficino. And Ficino, first one who tried to reinterpret this Christian, let's say, idea of 3 different spheres: this anima mundi, spiritus mundi, corpus mundi, and think about a lot about grace. Because again, important is how, for instance, all these different spheres interact with each other, and he proposed that properly interaction is happening through grace. And grace is very similar to light, because God is a sun, and sun emitting light, and of course light is equal to grace, something like this. And Ficino was the first one who say, well, physical world probably it's not only physical world, but it has different subtle, let's say, rough and subtle sub areas. And this grace, and now it's important point, grace belong to subtle material. And now. After this, there was a huge, let's say, breakthrough, at least in a philosophical way. But after this, you know, this is what we use even now. This grace, because this belongs to physical, subtle physical, it interacts with physical material, so it's quite easy. It can be accumulated in different materials, in water, for instance. It can, with different physical means, it can be transformed, and you know, it's more or less what we know now with terms of energy, information, so on and so on. And after this time, of course, this was as first done in the context of talismans, but in Mesmer time, all this grace energy was transmitted through wires and was accumulated in water. And then 100 years later in Reichenbach time, okay, now magnets, you know, all this model, they follow to some extent social development. Whatever ideas are popular in socials, then they immediately was conducted in this unconventional development. So in those time, this magnet and crystals, and so we observe now how Reichenbach work with these unconventional ideas, at least interpret in the way of magnetic, this force, magnetic force. Now 100 years later, again, for instance, if we compare Korschelt and Lachovsky, this exactly between them was development of radio. And in Korschelt, we see how this grace energy or light or whatever can be emitted through some devices, for instance, for a person, for healing, for instance, purposes. But now, only 40 years later, with frequencies, for instance, Lachovsky, we have now frequencies. And Lachovsky works strongly in terms of frequencies. He finds specific frequencies for treatment of different pathogens. I mean, you know all this development. And here we observe a change to the second model, what we also use now. This model related to radio. In radio, this huge social breakthrough. I mean, they change everything in our society. this Marconi and Popov device. And after everybody understood meaning of all of them, then immediately was a question, okay, this, for instance, telepathy probably is the same electromagnetic phenomena. We have here a sort of biological circuitry in our brain or in our body, and probably they interact exactly in this radio frequency way. This idea, by the way, was popular probably up to 50s, yeah, so quite a very long time. Number of experimentation, for instance, Cazamali, just to tell them names. Cazamali here in Italy, in Germany, von Ardenne. And basically, based on them work, we know this electromagnetic emission has a biological impact, so it interacts with our body, with our, for instance, in molecular level, with our psyche. We have biologically active electromagnetic emissions, and now it's heavily used in different weapons, non-lethal weapons. But in parallel, of course, we should mention this radionics. I will not say too much in this way, but here in radionics is again it's an idea of this energy, light, grace. It's transmitted through wires. We have here rates instead of frequencies, and of course a lot of development in this line. I like personally Hieronymus. Because Hieronymus is the first one who introduced a sort of spectroscopy. He worked with frequencies. And especially this experiment, we conducted this as well, growing plants without sunlight. Really amazing. I mean, we know that plant can grow without plants, without sunlight. Yeah, but here all these experiments and wires. I mean, there's a huge community work with this. Just to mention another huge community, James DeMeo. And Reich, of course, I mean, this cloudbuster. And this is, we observe the same story with, for instance, accumulating energy in some object, transmitting energy, emitting energy, all this, let's say, effect what we also see in different areas. So from this point of view, just to conclude, this electromagnetic hypothesis is very useful and is received later on interesting extension. Because here is this vital force and similarity to electromagnetic to a lot in the way of de Broglie waves. But first observation, as a causal observation, he was the first one who proposed this. This effect is very similar to entropy. So this emission from all of these devices, the impact of this emission is very similar to impact of entropy, and the common assumption was probably we deal here with different entropic phenomena, more exactly with neg entropy. So negative and positive entropy. So negative entropy is neg entropy, yes. And then all this reinterpretation, this took something like 50 years to reinterpret all these results. So now, for instance, we think that we charge here neg entropy. So a lot of experiments related to taking this neg entropic effect from plants. This biotrons is very popular. So, for instance, we work with plants. We produce. We have a vertical farm, and we produce wheat, young wheat. And I personally know how this stimulating friction, stimulating effect of young plant is unbelievable. So this, like I said, is a large commercial area now. Many people do this biotron stuff. Of course, lot of experiments. Also in this area, need to mention John Conjane. I don't know whether you know. At least John Conjane is a famous guy. Is the first one who produced genetic hybrids only with this emission hybrids. Then of course Luc Montagnier, DNA, Peter Greif, and so on and so on. So it's a lot of development along this line. Really brief here. We have here computers, development of computers. And so we again experience right now reinterpretation of all of this phenomena in terms of computers. So we have, for instance, material world. We have something computer hardware. We have non-material something with software, so it's informational, and they produce again a sort of virtual. And so currently well-known informational model and virtual model, and they replace, or not really replace, they work in parallel. I mean, work in parallel. combination of informational effect, material effect, and virtual effect. Okay, and last slide in the modeling. Just to mention, because I will speak more about this, because we used this model quite heavily, in the last probably from 90s, at least Hammer of Penrose is from 90s, about 30 years now. Fisher model is published in 15, and spin-based. Also, I would say something like 10 to 15 years. So all different models. The idea is, of course, that all these phenomena are happening in quantum level. Hammer of Penrose, you know, related to changing of transfer, also wave function. In different subsystems, we have a sort of orchestration on different levels, from, let's say, quantum physics, very similar to synchronization of different quantum oscillator on different levels. And in this way, there is a sort of information processing. I like personally Fisher model, because Fisher model work with spins. And change of spins, for instance, phosphor molecules. Currently, we know there is the same phenomena with xenon. We see exactly the same with water, with hydrogen, for instance, oxygen. I mean, there's a lot of spin phenomena in this quantum biological model. And this review from 23-24. Currently, a large number of spin-related phenomena in quantum biology, quantum chemistry, quantum, for instance, catalyzer. Also, a lot of things what work now in the quantum level. And currently, we observe now, of course, again, a reinterpretation of all of these unconventional, let's say, phenomenology, unconventional effects in terms of quantum model. So, at least in the first part here, I provided a little bit insight and different phenomenological results without explanation. In this model, using model, we can interpret this or another result. But of course, if you use, for instance, model based on this negentropy, is one story. If you use model on, for instance, from radionics based on frequency rate, it will be completely different. In the quantum language now, it's again something completely different. So we have basically now to choose one of them. At least we use in our work, we use quantum. Because it's not only because it's modern now and recent one, because we just receive a lot of practical results. I will show this for two examples. So one is matter approaches, and the second for this more classical mind matter. Well. A little bit again for quantum biology. There are, let's say, two main effects what can be used. As the first one, this biological, as this entanglement generally. Entanglement work mostly between microscopic particles, not on the macro level. But if we have many particles, we observe collective phenomena, and exactly this collective phenomena appear on macro scale. And this macro scale entanglement very, let's say, commonly known in biological and in biology and in biological terms. For instance, experiments for entangling light and bacteria. It's quite old. Almost 10 years ago, these sort of experiments. We know multiple measurements in brain, so measuring entanglement in different brain regions for diseases, for instance, photon entanglement with brain tissue. We know, for instance, if we grow neuronal cells on the substrate and silicium, for instance, substrate. There is a number of publications related to entanglement between neuronal network, also real neuronal network, biological network, and photonic emission. Currently, popular is idea, for instance, using artificial neuronal network that consists of these entangled particles. So this sort of algorithm can be run in real systems. Based on this entanglement. I will not go because it's completely separated area, but at least we touch here the issue of this collective entanglement witness. And a lot of publications currently consider this collective phenomena, collective entanglement. I would like to put a little bit more attention on this publication, because I think there's a breakthrough, and we only starting to understand what does it mean. idea is that people measuring MRI, magnetic resonance imaging of brain, and so typically MRI is focused on hydrogen resonances as on water, because water is a major part of our body, something like 70 to 80%, especially in brain. Yeah. And water, only one isomer of water react with MRI with magnetic fields or ortho isomers. And what was discovered that in fact this ortho isomers, as a level of physical chemistry, ortho isomers oscillate about 1 per second, and this oscillation is exactly equal to heartbeat of a human person. So, and just I mean to say this again, I mean here we see level of physical chemistry. I mean this integral of this MRI is just a number of these molecules, ortho isomers, and ortho number of these molecules that oscillate with the heartbeat. There is no mechanism, physical or biological or physiological mechanism that connect this macroscopic, very macroscopic heartbeat with ortho isomers. But it seems, I mean, there is some link. But next one, there was just a nice part of this experiment. People as a person, this MRI tube is this was long-term experiments, and people in this tube, MRI tube, that was sleep, and in sleep mode there was no conscious functionality of brain, and people measured only a sort of noise. Instead of this periodical heartbeat, they measure only a noise. And if they wake up person, then they receive again this periodical heartbeat. And then they express a nice hypothesis in quantum, let's say, theory. There is a sort of mediator, and mediator can connect two systems and establish entanglement between two, for instance, particles or something else. And they assume that, for instance, this conscious activity of a brain or human consciousness, in other words, can establish a connection or entanglement between one very macroscopic system and very microscopic system. So, and this was one of this the conclusion of this paper. And just think about this. So, if we focus on different external systems, we can connect them, for instance, in molecular level. We can connect them with, for instance, water vapor, exactly with this ortho and para molecules, or some stable quantum system. I mean, there is a lot of things that are possible with this approach. Of course, after this paper, we see a number of discussion, reiteration, replication. Like I said, this is a breakthrough experiment. We also try to experiment here. What we have done, we took two electrochemical qubits. We call this macroqubits. Here, like here, and we try to put this cerebral mediator, I mean human person here, so that human person try to program behavior, the dynamics from the first qubit to the second qubit. So in this way, and then we can, for instance, put stimuli here, and through different functionality here we observe different response on the second qubit. And I mean, was of course a little bit skeptic about this, but finally we receive really nice results. We are able to program a dynamic of this two-qubit system. So once again, we put here different stimuli, program this function, and observe dynamics here. And yes, we receive indeed very much this dynamic is different and depend on intention of a human person. It's not exactly, in many cases, not exactly what we want, but still, I mean, we have a huge variability, and this variability is repeatable. What we done after this? We try to increase number of qubits, of microqubits. We created, in fact, two networks. And this network, this was a sort of scientific investigation, one of the projects. the idea is they use electrochemical reaction with dissolving of CO2, and they produce ions. And this number of ions depend on this, let's say, quantum properties of para and order isomers. They have different electrochemical reactivity, and then we observe nice correlation of many nodes in this network. I mean, something like this. Here, these 15 nodes in the network just in the same time behave in very similar way. So it's a sort of let's say, entanglement. Yes, we call it photon-assisted entanglement. And at least in this paper, we explore different conditions when this entanglement appear, whether light is important or some, let's say, magnetic field, as well as physical paper. But we conducted one experiment, nice experiment. We we open one node from this new network, also one node here. We open in public access, so it was visible in internet, and people can follow all this electrochemical dynamics. And we asked one person, we conducted this experiment with this person in older experiments. So we know them, and we just propose, look, you can also try to influence behavior in this node. So we say this quantum network, and try to, whatever you do in, your mental focus, try to influence, and we will see what will happen. And then indeed, we exactly this experiment, time of this experiment with this person, we see how the whole network become highly correlated. Just again to understand, here this node was open to a person, to some extent connected to this node and influence behavior of the whole network. And the consequences are huge. If, for instance, we have a large network here on the Earth, we can properly connect to this network and interact with it. So this is one of the crazy ideas. I will speak about this idea in the conclusion. So. This one of experiment of what we have done. It is a very short older experiment. We already saw this slide. This part is of interest, of really large interest. Here, here in Chisinau, here people grow seeds, these triticale seeds, and receive them so young plants. And we receive images of these young plants, put them on impedance spectrometer, and finally the idea was in Chisinau, 1,500 kilometers between both cities and two operators in between, and here a person, the first operator switch on light on and off in random time, and a second operator don't know about this, and only after this receive information here light is continuously on, and we just measuring all the time, measuring the electrochemical dynamics of water here. And the hypothesis of this experiment was, if we would have this, operator-object experiment, and whatever is happening with this Z, we will receive in this water properties of water, also electrochemistry of water. And indeed, this was absolutely amazing results here. Even we do not believe this. First, we replicating now this again and again. For instance, here red numbers is a time on or off time in Chisinau, and here is this black curves as electrochemical dynamics in Stuttgart. So, and you see correlation is great. It's about, let's say, difference in between 1 and 2 minutes. I mean, there's a high correlation. And now what we do, we are accumulating statistics, but you can see that here you can do this like operator-object way. This is one sort of instrumentation. Like I say, this is something new. We start to publish this, of course, but mostly what we do, we still conducting experimentation. But this the second one is white matter phenomena. We first touch these effects something like 10 to 12 years ago. With sensor, we approached this community who developed sensors for this. And the idea is just to give briefly some overview. Again, ortho and para isomers. The difference is the same water molecules, but here there's a rotation of hydrogen either in the same way or in opposite way. Once again, important, this is the same water. with all these water properties, chemical reactions, same water, but all these isomers, also both isomers, they have a different chemical reactivity. I mean, here in the para isomer, there's more reactive, about 30% more active chemical reactions with this isomer. For instance, for MRI, for nuclear magnetic resonance, or only ortho isomer interact, and between them we see a number of physical differences, chemical differences, and so on and so on. Important is energy of conversion is something like 10 of power minus 23 electron volt. I mean, this is extremely low. And now the idea was, at least in those times, because of this low energy conversion, you can use the system. So first of all, you need a chemical reaction. We use chemical reaction of CO2 dissolving. And here you conduct electrochemical spectroscopy, you're measuring temperature, you're measuring different parameters, and so this is more or less a quantum sensor. And well, how to use this quantum sensor? Quite easy. Okay, we integrate a person or whatever process here in this field, and measuring two effects. So one thermal effect, because they should be observed, and electrochemical effect. And so in this way we are able to measure all this. I mean, distant entanglement, very important. We can train people. Now, for this, is one of ideas for this development was training for persons. And so come to this mind. This on the market now, about 7 years on the market. So many people basically experiment with this. I would say something like a couple of thousand of experiments in different communities. So one of the main idea here, so you need local feedback to recognize your internal mental states, and you need a distant feedback to also from this quantum sensor with different speed of chemical reaction, different thermodynamic conditions, and so on. If you combine both, you receive a quite powerful device for whatever purposes you like. This was also one of these approaches. Like I said, we used it for training of operators. For human persons, they observe in web diagrams like this. They see also graphs. If no effect is detected, you see only a flat line. But if some effect is detected, you see also first of all qualitative also change, and you measuring this quantitatively. So you can more or less connect whatever your mental state. You can connect with this distant effect. It's important here, you need a number of iteration. We say, well, minimal number of session is 30, so 1 month. Iterate once per day or twice per day or once per 2 days, but periodically until you have the stable, and then you can see how you improve your capabilities, let's say from beginning to the end of this course. One example. It's quite old example. Again, I show this. Here we see, for instance, distant experiment. You see this from 19. Distant experiment, change of targeted change of chemical reactions here. And here is EEG. And in EEG, you know, if you do a mental focus, you can relax, or you can do a sort of meditation, and you can recognize exactly which state produce which, let's say, EEG diagrams. And now you can correlate whatever stage here produce this effect. You can learn about yourself, about your mental capabilities to produce this distant phenomena. So you can recognize this as a first, and then you can, you know, purposefully train exactly to create exactly this change in consciousness to generate this distant effect. So it was I don't know, we demonstrated this in water conference, Pollock water conference. So here in Europe, a lot of session. US, this was even live demonstration. We work a lot for Maharishi effect. For instance, for Maharishi effect, we didn't discover dependency between number of persons and outcomes. For instance, here in Facebook, there was I think 10,000 of people, but we do not see 10,000 more stronger effect. So, you know, but just example how to use this sort of technology. Okay, and last slide from this, we see how how, for instance, this correlate with astronomic events. For instance, water and whatever human behavior, fluids outside of this astronomic phenomena and inside, there are two different systems. And it's well visible, for instance, with mind or with impedance spectroscopy. Probably you also receive the same result. So this is more or less a confirmation that all this astronomic events heavily impact us. Everything is published. You can find in the homepage, at least most of them are published. And now conclusion and some crazy ideas. Crazy idea one. What if, for instance, we have this qubit system? And look, qubit system is very simple. It's just spin of a particle or of a vapor molecule. And if they are connected, of course, through chemical interaction, physical interaction, entanglement, and so they create a network. And just iterating results, you can receive extremely complex system here from very simple particle. And now there was said in the context of Boltzmann, that you probably know this Boltzmann brain, that a sort of extremely intelligent system can appear through this interaction. And now, sort of crazy questions. Well, can it really exist? And we saw in publications, for instance, there is a number of publications explore exactly this sort of behavior. So, for instance, it was said particle can do artificial network like algorithms. They can process information. They can store information. A question is probably, the Boltzmann brain really exists. Question is, can we transfer our consciousness here in this network? Complexity of our brain is very similar to the complexity of this network. Even this network is much more complex because there's more particles in our atmosphere than neurons in our brain. So question is, can we copy our consciousness here? Can we interact with the system? And this question of interaction, we ask ourselves about, about 5 years ago. Let's assume we have the system. The system is very intelligent and probably can store and process information. Can we communicate with the system? So it's a well-known idea in the context of transcommunication, but we do not call it intentionally this transcommunication because it's not really transcommunication, just communication with the same system as the Earth. We know the system, we understand the system, we just try to communicate with it. This is a sort of communication. We developed a matrix. This is the same system with electrochemistry. Matrix, we code signals in the first of all, and semantics in the binary messages here, but we also code in the signal forms. And finally, we conducted 3 series of experiments. We saw very well. Quite okay between the difference between control and experiments, and was the first series of experiment was completely successful. We received exactly what we expected, but after this, in the second and third series, we receive a response, but we do not understand it. We tried. If we try to encode this, we should either to increase our basic assumption, or just say this random noise. And so it's not enough this. We also receive a session, additional session, 4th session that we didn't plan. We receive sort of impression that we do not experiment with this network, but this network experimented with us. And in this time, this become crazy enough, and we stop it just to understand, okay, what is done. Should we really, assume that here are a sort of intelligence, and we really interact with this intelligence? I think generally, this is a sort of interesting and promising direction where we can go. But it's crazy, of course. It's absolutely crazy. Okay, to conclude. First of all, I think. We have unconventional effects of consciousness. They are well measurable, there are multiple replication. Probably somebody can say, well, it's pseudo scientific or whatever, but we apply here the same criteria for peer review evaluation, and we receive more or less. If I would, for instance, evaluate it, I would pass this paper. So it's definitely, I mean, this unconventional effect they exist. There's another question whether we understand it or not. But phenomenology as such definitely exists. We saw in the last years, last 5 years probably, really a revolution in quantum biology. For instance, appearance of Fisher model, appearance of spin-based chemistry and spin-based biology, and we experience now really biology in quantum system. In relation to in relation to biology, yeah. If we try to, let's say, apply this this idea from biology, we see, at least in our laboratory and in our community, we see two different things. As first of all, related to non-classical cerebral mediator, it's very promising. I mean, whatever is received is absolutely crazy, but we can also improve a sort of classical approaches from white matter stuff in new understanding with new sensor and new technologies. What we also definitely see, probably you also see, I would like to discuss this point, whether a connection of consciousness to external system is possible or not. Because you know, there's things from last years, from this years, people seriously think about connecting consciousness to quantum computer exactly through entanglement. You know, it's an absolutely non-invasive approach. We don't need to put any electrodes in our brain. The question is this possible? What are consequences of this? But I think that this connecting consciousness to external system is definitely becoming a reality. And if it will be a reality, then I would say that consciousness is probably not limited to our biological brain. So probably we can transmit our algorithms or whatever what we have in our brain, we can transmit to internal system, we can interact with the system. So it's so our consciousness is something more larger than a biological system, biological brain. Okay, thank you. This is all from my point of view.
All right, thank you, Sergey. We've had quite a few comments in the chat, and we have a few questions. Some of the questions go back to some of your early slides, like around 12 to 15 was the number of the slides. And let me pull up the question here.
Should I read this question or?
No, I was going to read it for you. I'm just
okay,
pulling
okay.
it. There were a lot of messages here. So they were looking at the slides where you were measuring the chemical changes. So I think it was around slides 12 through 15. And one of the slides you showed an increase in the skin temperature. And the question was, has the core body temperature ever been tested to reflect if it goes up or down?
Oh, yes. Okay, I share again this slide. Okay, I think you can see my slides, yeah?
Yes.
I will switch it. Okay. Here. Okay, I see this as well. So, I mean, this is measured in two ways. This skin temperature in infrared and by LM35 temperature sensor here, like here, in the contact way. But this core body temperature. This is one of the most important measurements, because you know you cannot falsify core body temperature. It's inside of the body. It's not related to environment, and it's not easy to measure, I would say. And yes, this is measured in as core body temperature. And it's possible to do this in two ways, as increasing and decreasing. Increasing is easy. You know, whatever you put your focus of your temperature, as a first is increasing blood circulation, And after this, blood increases the temperature in the body. But if you remove focus, typically it should go down, like here. Like with this Tibetan monks, that immediately go down. But if you put, focus of attention in this meditative way, it's keep a long time. And exactly what we observe here in body core temperature. Yes, it's keep a long time. It's start to, because if you decrease it, of course, thermodynamics still keep in the inside of the body. It's a little bit increasing, but still, it keep in the same level. And you see, there's extremely high temperature, is 38. That was exactly this point after increasing temperature. We try to cool down, in this conscious way. And so to answer the question, yes, we measure this, and yes, demonstrate both for increasing and decreasing for core body temperature.
Okay, and if this were to be restarted, like in today's world, would there be more candidates from your viewpoint? And this was like the rabbit slide.
Can you please say which slide number?
That one I didn't have a slide number on.
But okay, can you repeat the question?
They just were curious if we were to do this experiment again, would there be more candidates from your viewpoint?
Here, with this body temperature. This is easy to do, that sort of experiment, because the reason why I selected for this phenomenological part, because many people already done it, and from technical equipment, you know, in those time, this infrared camera, this 8 to 40 micrometer camera, that was extremely expensive. Now you can order it for, I would say, something like 500 euro or something like this. You know, it's very easy to measure this. So every laboratory or even private person can do this. You know, just a matter of little bit, let's say, put some effort for developing this methodology, devices, and the patient for obtaining the results. Even for instance, here we use non-trained people, ordinary people, without any, let's say, they are not known for any psychic activities, gifts or whatever. Every person is capable, at least for basic level, of this phenomena. This is at least our conclusion for that experiments.
Okay, and another question, who would you consider the top 3 companies or research facilities in the world currently in this field?
Which company, sorry?
No, who would you consider the top 3 companies?
Top 3 companies, yes, top 3 companies. Glen Ryan. I don't know. I mean, you need financial support. I would say top company are the same candidate like Amazon, Facebook, and Google. They do a lot of crazy research now, especially for this extending lifespan. And as far as I know, they work in different directions, not only in biochemical level. So they consider different hypotheses. Also one of the top is definitely, I forgot this name. This company is in California, but from Google. Yep.
All right, thank you. Has anyone found a potential pathway to reverse the Havana syndrome?
Please, because I have some acoustic problem probably here. Okay, can you please repeat it?
Has anyone found a potential pathway, excuse me, to reverse the Havana syndrome?
Which syndrome?
The Havana syndrome.
Havana, of course, Havana syndrome. We had a number of discussion regarding this Havana syndrome. I probably will not comment this point because it's. I know there are some people work on this. At least at least my point was here, just to say, well, this impact in biological system, because here is the main point is definitely non-acoustic and non-electromagnetic. And there is a number of hypotheses and experiments that work with impact on between remote impact and biological object. And I mean, we should probably consider more historical experiment toward this, toward that stuff in Havana-Sai syndrome.
All right, I'm looking through to see if there's any more questions.
So sorry, my question is for the seminar. Normally in seminars we do a sort of discussion in the community. Do we here have a discussion or just a normal session question answer session?
No, we can open it up. We just have to be mindful of the time, but we can. Let me go here, and if there's any discussion, let me unmute people.
Because for us it's also of interest, I mean, to exchange opinions between different communities. Currently, communities are not so strongly connected. It could be nice, I mean, to establish more connections, for instance, to invite the people in this European space, in the conferences, you know, sort of this more intensive, for instance, experimentation. And same with healer, we can measure some effects as quite useful effects with healers, or the distance phenomena. Is, let's say, any of that effect are of interest for US community?
I was just gonna, if anybody has any questions or wants to, you know, have some discussion, I believe you can unmute yourself. And if you're not able to, just send me a chat.
My name is Andrew Mikulski. I'd like to know what, how important, in your view, is spin, as you mentioned it, in spin isomers?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, and basically good discussion. I think you know, in models, what I've shown, there are different approaches to understand this phenomena. But none of these, let's say, approaches, for instance, negentropy, we don't know what is negentropy or frequencies. You know, if somebody say, okay, I have some beautiful frequency for pathogens, yeah, then my first question, okay, sorry, what sort of frequencies do you mean? Electromagnetic frequencies or some light frequencies? I mean, what is this? And finally, spins, or let's say quantum methodology, quantum model, it provides more or less something tangible. What you really can, take as a model, change. You can discuss with colleagues from physics and chemistry, because they understand this language and they experimented, and so we can interpret our results in terms of their model, and we can publish it. And you cannot publish these frequencies. And just to answer this point, I think that spins is currently one of breakthrough, because, for instance, energy conversion. If consciousness in this or another way is capable to change this spin conversion, to influence spin conversion, so we can explain, for instance, changes in fluids. Why properties of fluid are changing? Because there is a spin conversion between ortho and para isomers. Fluids become more chemically reactive, and we observe all these physiological changes in body. We observe all these, for instance, pH changes because the same chemistry. We observe different conductivity, electrical conductivity of fluids. We observe, for instance, different biochemical reaction just because of change of para ortho isomer and different chemical reactivity. So we can explain this. And though from this point of view, I would say it's one of key points for future development, also in this 21st century.
I'd like to continue asking, Have you ever experienced or experimented with monopolar situation? Where if you have an object and no matter how you look at it, it has the same spin.
Not really, let's say, not really in that way. We try to put the weights in terms of either wave function, something like collapse of wave function, but it's difficult to measure. So you need a completely different instrumentation. Here, advantage is that because of these macro spins, if you have many particles and they change spins, you can measure this in cheap equipment, something like equipment in the range between €1,000 and €10,000. With optical spectroscopy, portable MRI, nuclear magnetic resonance, or even electrochemistry. So from this point of view, we focus on something what we can measure, because this is a key point. So I'm not sure that I can answer your question, just my feeling. If we, in this community, in unconventional community, we do not have a lot of money. We don't have, huge grants. We do not have. We are lucky if we have some project and we can fund from this project something else, some fun, let's say. But nevertheless, I mean, we need to find a sort of technology cheap enough and precise enough. And, this more or less our consideration between accuracy of measurements, let's say, how this model and this measurement are, let's say, are they strong enough for some confirmation? So this more or less points what we consider.
Sergey?
Hi.
Hello?
Hi,
Hello?
hi.
Are you aware of that you are talking about the etheric gases that have been postulated by Mendeleev in 1902 and placed before hydrogen? There you have a lot of data, and he even calculated the masses of the hydrogen, of the etheric gases. And the gases were described by Steiner in 1910, and also written down by Wachsmuth in 1932, and explained how they work. There are 4 gases on the planet and 7 gases in the cosmos, and there is a guy who has found qubits calculations in the chamber of the pyramid, in the king's chamber of the pyramids, and he calculated the wavelengths of the gases, and I have calculated the frequencies on the wavelengths and masses of the gases. So there is a lot of data that is very basic physical data that you can use in your experiments, because it's a talk about the same thing all the time, the last more than 100 years. The problem in the whole soup is Einstein. He actually made sure nobody went into this direction. So if we can cross out Einstein and his idiotic, stupid formulas, we will get into some real business of etheric technology. I can send you the calculations if you want them.
Yes, please, yes. It's with pleasure, yes, if you can share, great. Just some comments, I mean, I know, Steiner, of course, he is very popular, still popular, Steiner. I know, little bit about ether, these early ideas. We have a sort of a new ether, quantum vacuum in the way of new ether. Yes, probably. This was another model. I didn't mention this model, but still, you are right, yeah.
The Mendeleev, so you can read it.
Yeah, I see this, yeah. But I think generally, there is a model, and this model can be useful for interpreting one or another experiment. Why not?
Okay.
Yeah. Because I know, for instance, the models, they consider physical vacuum as a superfluid, I think, that was in that way. And this superfluid, as a vacuum as superfluid, was equal, as more or less similar to ether. And again, the sub areas of ether properly, like you say, these gases. Though it's still, still in discussion. So I was surprised by this, but nevertheless, still in discussion. Yeah.
Sergey?
Oh, somebody says here, I shall share the frequencies. Well, I don't know if I can do that because that's actually technical information that can be abused. So I don't just share things like that for everybody. That's for mathematicians and for real, researchers that I don't want to have these data just floating around in space. I can give it to some people who really want to do research, and I have to know who I am giving it to.
Well, can I make a suggestion? Schumann had the Schumann resonance frequencies. The Earth is he found the Earth to resonate a frequency between 7 hertz and 9 hertz, depending on the time of day. And if you use 7.83 hertz in your you're spinning, and you can use Tesla coils to initialize a spin rather than motors or some other control, and the spin should be equal to the rotation of the Earth, the speed of the rotation of the Earth. So they have two very important pieces of data right there that would help hone in on the human consciousness, and they're not just esoteric frequencies or well, maybe if we do this and this, maybe something will happen. So I just wanted to add that.
I'd like to make a comment here. In the last few days, the relationship between the planet and the ionosphere has changed somewhat, and there is now being a trend to have great intensity of Schumann resonances near the 20 to 35 hertz, and the different resonances at the middle range are similar to each other. They have follow similar patterns. I can send you that information to all of you. This is very interesting. It comes from space weather people, so it probably is a very important thing because resonances such as these have a great psychoactive impact on people and animals as well, possibly even plants. Thank you.
Yes, just to give some comment on this issue with frequencies. Yes, Schumann, this low frequency, we also experiment with this. With plant, it seems they really have a sort of biological impact, but not because, at least it's my point of view, it's not only because of their, let's say, strange effect, but just because a plant is sensitive to this frequency. So it's let's say the point of resonance is because plants, when we're speaking about plant, so because plants is sensitive to exactly this sort of frequencies. We tested with electrical field. If we modulate electrical field with low frequency, magnetic field with low frequency, it is a point of this frequency selection, at least with plants. If you're working with spins, we didn't discover, just to be honest, we didn't discover strong frequency phenomena. So mostly what important is, for instance, magnetic field. They are extremely sensitive to magnetic fields. Even in plant cryptochrome, they also use this sort of, let's say, spin phenomena in Ross reaction in plant cryptochrome. They're able to sense something like 50 nanonewton. Not Newton, nanotesla. And this extremely low magnetic field. I mean, in Earth magnetic field, we have something like 70 microtesla, and here 50 nanotesla. So it's extremely sensitive. And the point is, just you know, to find a sort of proper physical carrier, as a magnetic field, electric field, or something different, and a targeted system. So it's not, at least in none of experiments, we really deal with frequencies, or let's say found some frequency are more, let's say, useful or less useful. But this properly in our experiments.
Again, I think a good way of looking at the resonances is that they're really terms of reference for any living system to say, I'm going towards it, away from it, and so on. It's sort of a reference to synchronize, if you wish. You know, I think that's their main information purpose.
But is anybody, just my question, is anybody here work with network, for instance, some quantum networks, try to communicate in any way with this? I mean, there's this network point of view on the whole methodology. Is anybody, let's say, do this stuff? Or transcommunication, I mean, in transcommunication, more or less similar methodology.
Well, I wish to thank you very much for a very nice presentation. It's not an easy one to make, and it involves decades of research.
Long. 60 minutes is really long, yeah.
I know.
And Sergey, can I, it was a great presentation. Can I pick up on the spin, this discussion of the spin? Are you familiar with torsion? Can you comment on torsion physics and its possible connection to spin, spin torsion coupling as one of the possible mechanisms?
Yes. It's another very good question. Yeah, I know Shipov personally. I mean, we had a long discussion. I'm not physics, so my background is not physics. So it's difficult to understand, to be honest. I mean, I tried really to understand, but it seems there's sort of assumption in the book on the theory, and if you are not, capable to understand this assumption, you cannot understand the whole theory. So it's I failed completely, I should say. Well, but we in our community, at least, we have people who work with this extension of torsion, spin torsion theory. It seems there is a lot. The point is, for instance, even in our paper, we see that spins are able to interact with each other. But what by which mean? In which mean they can interact? And this is exactly where is the place for distortion stuff. For instance, some not really modern, but some, let's say, subset of this distortion field. Say, for instance, there is a sort of spin-spin interaction with axion. So axion-based interaction, or they say, well, the spin-spin interaction is through specific geometry of space. That is the idea of Shipov by itself. So, and then, my point is I completely do not understand it at all, but it doesn't mean that theory is wrong. I know as personally people who really believe and work in the framework of this theory, try to extend it. If you, write me email, I can provide contacts to people. By the way, we had about two months ago a conference related to consciousness. It was a lot of talk for the spin-based approach, for torsion-based spin-torsion interaction, spin-axion interaction. So it's more or less hardcore physics or theoretical physics.
Right. Thank you. I'll send you an email. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
I can make a contact probably. I mean, there will be some nice experimentation, nice theoretical work.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other discussion, or are we wrapping up for the day?
Oh, one more thing, Serge. What part do neutrinos play in the communication between objects?
So sorry, once again, acoustic. What kind of neutrino, or what kind? Sorry, can you please repeat it?
Yes. What role do neutrinos play in this communication between objects?
That is a good point. I know that, for instance, a part of community work with low energy nuclear reactions, this latter. And then it seems a sort of very nice overlapping between whatever spin-based stuff and because there is a biological low energy nuclear reaction and most of energy, because they should produce a lot of energy, and it seems that some energy is consumed through neutrino, through neutrino emission. So this connection. Probably, they play some role in this effect as well. But the question is, for measuring this, you need a sort of good instrumentation, models. You need probably some people from physics who deal, and then chemistry who understand, because, probably neutrino will not interact with chemistry at normal level. I cannot really say more on this point because, we focus mostly on spins because they are measurable. So. No answer,
All right, well, I would like to thank everyone for showing up today for Sergey, and if you haven't already signed up for our 50th anniversary conference coming up in the Chicagoland area, July 17th through the 20th, please do so. And we hope to see you there or see you at our next masterclass.
Okay.
Recording stopped.
Okay, then thank you very much again for this invitation, for a very nice discussion. I hope we can meet in the next event. Yep.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Yep.
Thank you, Sergey.
Mm.